Okay, are we ready? Please give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can see me, if you can hear me. One thumbs up if you can see me, one thumbs up if you can hear me. When I see two thumbs up in the chat, then I will proceed. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay. Got a thumbs up. Then let's get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the now fifth installment of the Layer 10 Live Masterclass. And whether you're here for the first time or you're a returning visitor because you just can't get enough, you know this to be true. The way we've been designing and deploying technology in our projects is broken, massively, completely, and in all other ways broken. But the good news is it isn't irreparable. We can fix it. And if you're here, you're likely either a developer, an architect, contractor, operator, or a facility manager. And chances are you're seeing the same thing we are. Technology is changing the way buildings are designed, built, and managed. But here's the truth. Most commercial real estate professionals are still trying to figure it out as they go. That's why we've created Layer 10 and the Layer 10 Academy. So you don't just keep up, you lead. By the end of this masterclass, I will have equipped you with new ideas and insights into this overlooked component of CRE development. Welcome to Designing Smarter Buildings, a technology strategy for CRE professionals. Let's get started. What if you didn't have to walk into the first design meeting guessing, but instead walked in with a clear plan to figure out what the technology needs to do and when those decisions need to happen? What if your architects, IT, and contractors were all aligned before the first RFP ever went out? What if your next project launched with a clear vendor neutral plan so every system worked together and no one got blindsided? I get it. IT is scary and misunderstood. It gets ignored, shrugged aside, like the proverbial can that gets kicked down the road. It's not picked up until it's too late. This reminds me of a meeting we had with one of our early prospects who did go on to become a client, longtime client. When we sat down with him for the first time, I asked, Ryan, why did you agree to take this meeting? I then let him speak for 15, 20 minutes talking about his great disdain for IT, how it's too expensive, it's too complicated, it's always late, it doesn't work. When it does get completed, nobody knows how to use it. When he was done, I finally answered, well, Ryan, that's exactly why Layer 10 is in business, to solve those very problems. And that is how we got into business, why we got into this business. We agree that technology is complicated, challenging, and can be expensive, especially expensive when you end up investing in the wrong things. And you can't afford to get it wrong. You can't afford to continue to ignore it, especially in today's climate. Technology is a critical component of the success to your project, and it's too often overlooked until it's too late. We put it off because it scares us, because it's expensive, because we don't want to face it. But here's the dirty little secret. The longer we wait, the less attention it receives, the more it costs. The longer we put it off, the greater the chaos down the road. We cannot afford to keep ignoring the role of technology in our spaces any longer. Smart buildings sound great until you're in the middle of a build with no plan for the tech. Even if you're not building smart, you're not looking for the latest and greatest, there's a certain level of technology expected in whatever space you're building. Too often, in too many builds, technology is considered too late, engaging vendors that push conflicting agendas, and no one owns the process. No one is ultimately accountable. And where does that get you? Frustration, budget overruns, broken user experiences. We decided to fix that. Now, a bit about me. You may have seen me speaking at a conference or heard me on podcasts or have read some of my materials, or maybe you're a subscriber to my newsletter, or you see me on CNN.com, Colorado Real Estate Journal. But for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, my name is Ken Wilkinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Layer 10. We're the creator of the Layer 10 framework and the Layer 10 Academy. Also, along with my wife, Zara, we are the co-board presidents of Trailhead Community, a nonprofit building housing for adults with IDD. I'm also in the process of finishing my first book, Bricks to Brilliance, Designing Buildings That Think. But the most important thing to know about me is that I'm passionate about fixing the disconnect between how buildings are built and how people actually experience them. I want to start with a story of how Layer 10 got started. The truth is, I didn't set out to do this kind of work. One day at my old firm, I was assigned to a project with DaVita, the kidney care company. They needed someone to lead the IT components of their headquarters build in Denver. Now, here's the thing. I'd never worked on a building project before, and I had very little experience with IT infrastructure. I was a software guy. I knew a little bit about networking and infrastructure, but not nearly enough to be considered an expert. But as a consultant, you learn to accept the seemingly impossible, to embrace the discomfort, jump in, figure things out, and keep things moving forward, even when it's new and a little scary. But what I found in that project is that I just love the work, helping to build something real, something you can walk through, touch, and see. It took me back to when I started college as an architecture student. After one class at the University of Florida, the vaunted Ivy League of the South, go Gators, I abandoned the idea of becoming an architect. It didn't really take me the entire class for me to figure out that that was not for me. I was not cut out for that grind. And I switched my majors to IT. So here I am 20 years later, actually working at the intersection of both of those areas, technology and architecture. After that project, I took a new job running a team at a big company outside of consulting. It was fine. I was brought in to fix a problem, to build an organization. But after we got everything up and running, there was nothing left for me to do, and I was getting bored. And that's when I had my first big aha moment, my first epiphany. I love to build things. I'm not meant to just keep them running. I need to create. I tried finding new challenges in that job, but my boss kept telling me, Ken, stop consulting to me. Everything is running well. I just need you to keep running it. But I eventually stopped fighting that guidance and realized that's not who I am. I'm a builder, a teacher, I'm a guide. I need to be helping others grow and solve real problems. So being as bored as I was, I started a couple of side hustles. None of them worked out, but I did learn a lot. Some lessons more expensive than others. I've learned to call them my tuition payments. Then the company announced layoffs and I volunteered to go. I was ready for something new. Although I have to admit, I was still nervous. I'd never been out of work before. I had never been laid off. And guess what happened? That same client from that office build, my last project in consulting, DaVita, was building a second office across the street and wanted to bring me back. So a few weeks later, I was back doing the work that I love, technology and CRE development. And I started thinking, is there a business here? A firm focused on solving the problem of a lack of focus on the technology components of CRE construction. So my co-founder and I started socializing the idea with developers, architects, builders within our networks. And everyone said the same thing. Yes, we need this. We would hire you today if you were ready. So we got ready. We launched Layer 10, a consulting company focused on helping people plan the right technology for their spaces. Then one day, not long after we launched, I was in a sales meeting and I asked the prospect why he wanted his project to be smart. And he virtually hired me on the spot. I'll go more into that story later, but that was my second big aha. The product isn't the most important thing. The purpose is. What are we trying to do? Who are we building this for? That's where the magic happens, before the first foot of cable is even installed. A beautiful space at Go Live that works for its users begins with asking the right questions at the right time at the design table. And that moment confirmed for us what Layer 10 is all about. Ask the right questions. Put people first. Choose gear that fits the goal. Don't change your goals to fit the gear. And since then, we've stayed true to that mission, and it works. Until the recent economic challenges, we've had kept every client we've ever worked with. Even DaVita, that very first client, is still a client to this day. And that's the story of how Layer 10 began. Now let's dig deeper into the guiding principles that came from the journey of our beginning. And let me go back to that sales story that I mentioned. This was our first incoming sale from an article that we had invested in, some sponsored content, as it's called. And it was our biggest sales investment that we had made. And as a firm, we were only in our first or second year. And we got some total of one outreach from that. And it was a very brief email that just simply read, here's my name, here's my website. I need your help making it smart. Call me. So I did exactly that. Of course, I caught him in the airport, so we were only able to chat for a minute, but we scheduled time to meet. And I had him meet us in the lobby of the space that we had just finished building, which gave me the opportunity to point out, demonstrate some of the things that we do. We didn't take a full tour of the building. We just stayed in the lobby. So it was really just a snapshot of our work. And then we walked across the street for lunch. And after the server took our orders, which is typically how these sales meetings go, you wait for that change of pace to then turn from small talk to business. And I did exactly that. And the question that I asked him was simply, Sean, why do you want Miller's Landing to be a smart city? And the question took him aback. And he paused and he leaned back in his chair and he said, Ken, I'm talking to, and he rattled off 2 or 3 vendors, integrators in the smart city space, names that you would know, great products, great teams, products that we use, that we deploy for our clients. And he went on to explain, I'm talking to all of these guys. Not one of them has asked me that question. All they do is they come in with the gear that they're trying to sell and tell me, this is what I need to make Miller's Landing smart. But they don't know because they haven't asked. And that's why I need you on the team. And I share that story because it was then that we realized these guiding principles that you see here were the key differentiators in our industry. This was how we were going to improve how technology is integrated into physical space by focusing on design, centered on the human experience, and maintaining product neutrality until that design is completed. And here's the ugly secret. These human-centered design principles are not new to the work that we're doing here. They're not new to commercial real estate. Can you imagine architecting plans for a hotel, for example, without knowing anything about the goals of the owner, the target market? Or are you going after business travelers or families on holiday? Not to mention the market competition. We don't do that with architecture, interior design, or landscaping. Yet it's common practice to leave IT on the outside looking in. Maybe that's because technology isn't considered a creative field, but we aim to change that. That's not the case anymore. Layer 10 is in business to change that very mindset, to bring the same design discipline to the technology layer of the built environment. And I'll freely admit, this isn't rocket science. It's a simple mindset shift in how we approach technology in the spaces we build. We begin with the design. We often call this the art of the possible. This is where we dream. We push ourselves to see how big we can dream. How can we create insanely great experiences? What we're designing is the vision of what the space could be, what the future could look like. But design means nothing if it isn't centered on the end user, the human being who will be occupying the space. To have success in this arena, we have to be radically committed to this human experience, not the technology itself. The technology, the products, are a means to the end, a space that works, not just in its form or in its fashion, but in its function. We don't lead with the product, we land on the product through our design process. And despite what you might think, people don't desire specific technologies. What they truly desire is a result, what they can do in the space. And what they can do is very much dependent on the technology. There's a quote I like from Guy Kawasaki. The purpose of innovation is not cool products, but happy people. Is this making sense? Are you guys getting this? Is this resonating with you? Okay. So moving on, how do we put these principles into practice? This is the Layer 10 way, the DSDS framework. Another quote here, this one from George Bernard Shaw. Imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. On the previous slide, we talked about the design focus and how we determine what could be done. I was in a design charrette once that illustrates this point about what's possible. The architect for an office that was part of a multi-acre development we were working on asked me, Ken, I don't know if we can do this from a technology perspective. I interrupted him and said, yes. Now, what is it that you would like to do. The point here is that there's a difference between what could be done and what should be done. And we make that determination based on developing user personas, writing use cases, and walking those user personas through day in the life of scenarios to develop those use cases. And from there, we've narrowed what could be done down to what should be done. And we then select the appropriate systems and the vendors to deliver them. We're talking about innovation, of course, but innovation has nothing to do with how much you spend. It's about creating a great product. The product in this case is your space with great experiences that end users will love. Keep in mind, sometimes the final decision is not the most innovative or the most expensive product. Often what best fits the use case is simplicity over sophistication. As part of this process, we also consider the typical project constraints: budget, schedule, market readiness. A critical piece often missed in the product selection is risk tolerance. How close to the bleeding edge is your client comfortable with? All of this is input into the strategic technology plan, which documents all of our decisions and describes how everything works together. But strategy without execution is like an idea that never gets put into practice. Ideas are easy. Strategy is easy. Execution is where it's at. So from selection, we move on to the deployment phase. This is where the rubber meets the road, where the work moves from the suits to the boots. This is when all that planning and design and selection pays off in execution. Now, it's critical at this phase to ensure the proper leadership is in place to lead all the technology vendors in a coordinated manner, giving your client a single throat to choke, so to speak. And as we move to go live, after go live, our attention turns to the support model. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about managed services support. The key thing to understand here is that support starts during design. We actually don't wait till after deployment before we start thinking about that. We always have to remind ourselves that we're not just building for the building's occupants. It's just as important that the operators, the property management and facilities teams, are delivered a suite of products they're trained to use and with a support plan that maintains operability and user engagement. Otherwise, you risk spending a lot of money on tools that aren't used correctly, if they're used at all. The key here is not to necessarily get into the managed services business, but to not ignore the support needs of the technology you select and deploy. And now for our segment, Technology Run Wild, where we look at examples, real-world examples of bad technology design. Now, I want to preface this by saying I am a technology enthusiast. I believe technology is a force for good in the world, but even I don't believe all tech is good tech. Case in point, I present what we call the digital toilet occupancy system. I was in the Baltimore airport on a layover a couple of months ago, and I saw this system deployed. And this is a perfect illustration of elegant design, beautiful application, without a focus on the human experience. That key component was missing in whoever decided to design and install this system. It's clear that somebody took technology that was developed for another use case, that being smart parking, a very useful application of this technology, and applied it to bathrooms. But what is the use case here in this scenario? There are really three things that could happen. You are in need of relief, and you approach this restroom and you find there is excess or some availability, in which case you go on in just as you would if there was no sign. The only other scenario is this sign reads 0 toilets and 0 urinals for the men. So now you have a decision to make, and your options are limited. You can look for the next restroom, but if you're at DIA, that might be a quarter-mile walk away. Or you can hold it, return to your gate, and go on the plane. But if you can't hold it and you don't feel like walking further, you're just going to get in line. Either way, this information isn't helpful. The key component that's missing is how long is the line, not how many stations are available for use. And unless the line is spilling out into the hallway, you are not given that information. So one way or another, there's availability or not. In most cases, you're still going right in. This is a perfect example of technology deployed for technology's sake, a slick solution with no use case. Not to mention, there's a bit of a creepy factor here that needs to be considered. I don't mind you knowing where my car is parked, but I'm not sure how comfortable I am with you knowing where my butt is parked. The moral of the story, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, would a digital toilet occupancy system fall within the technology scope? And if, despite our advice to the contrary, our client insisted on implementing such a system, the answer is yes. In a typical project, the IT scope includes everything that needs an internet connection. It's critically valuable. It's incredibly valuable to have all of the technology under a single umbrella of design and implementation leadership. Everything that touches the network, including the network itself. Our scope of work typically covers all the tools and systems from networking and Wi-Fi to conference room audio visual, physical security, IoT devices, PoE lighting, intelligent building management systems, EV charging stations. As we mentioned, the way we determine what is in and out of scope is through design shreds, where we use user personas and day in the life of scenarios to flesh out the scope using the lens of the 5 categories you see here: safety and security, mobility, community, sustainability, and service performance. This is the framework for how we walk our clients through the design process by considering the role technology plays in our lives through each of these dimensions. Now, let me talk about one of these areas as an illustration. We'll focus on mobility. We were in a design shred, for a mixed-use development with multifamily, hospitality, office, retail, F&B, and public space. We took each of the user personas aligned with those parts of the property: resident, hotel guest, office employee, shopper, diner, and visitor. When we looked at the shopper, diner, visitor persona, we identified some common challenges, some pain points: parking availability, the convenience of that parking to the destination, then paying for that parking. And those challenges turned into identification of opportunities. How can we empower visitors to pre-schedule their parking? And we talked about developing a community app. And now when you get into that space, if you're able to penetrate the mobile device, that opens opportunities for live advertisement, programming announcements, dynamic deals and coupons from our restaurant tours and retailers once you're at the property. We then considered the visitor who would be parking an electric vehicle. That opened up conversations about charging stations and how can we leverage them for signage, advertising, and wayfinding rather than leaving them as simply a post on the sidewalk. Perhaps there's something more we can do with those. And considering our proximity of this particular development to the interstate, that led into a discussion of talking to Tesla about building a supercharger station on the property. That amenity by itself would drive traffic to the property. People for whom the development was not their destination. They're just merely passing through town and they need a charge. And while their cars are charging, they can visit our shops and restaurants. Perhaps that's enough to inspire them to come back, and when they can spend more time exploring and spending more money. So what started as a conversation about parking turned into an opportunity to penetrate the mobile devices of our target audience. This is prime real estate if you can get in there. Improving the attraction for retail and F&B, identifying a new potential builder or tenant, and how to increase traffic to the property. We started out with a pain point. With technology, we ended up identifying opportunities to increase attraction, traffic, and monetization. Is this making sense so far? Are you guys getting this? Is this resonating with you? I hope you guys are getting something out of this. I want to now share an example of what this looks like in practice. I want to tell you a story about my favorite client, Trailhead Community. My story with Trailhead began with a conference I was scheduled to speak at that actually never got off the ground. It was a September conference, and we had an early snowstorm that came in and kept many people away. But we, and along with maybe 100 other vendors, were already there, speakers, attendees. Our booth was set up. We were having our coffee and networking when the organizers announced we were going to have to reschedule at a future date, TBD. But we were invited to stick around as long as we'd like. The coffee would keep coming. The music was on. And we did that. And before we started packing up, somebody approached our booth and started going through materials. And I introduced myself to who turned out to be the architect for Trailhead. And he started telling me their story. Trailhead Community is a housing is building housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are tens of thousands of, we call them our kids, but they're over the age of 18 living with parents over the age of 60. And that's in Colorado alone. This is a problem that is prevalent across the United States and many areas of the world. And there's no real solution for what happens to these kids when their parents pass. And as this architect, his name is John, was talking to me, he obviously had no way of knowing. He just so happened to be talking to the father of an autistic teenager at the time. My daughter Audrey is now 21. And Trailhead soon after that became a client and immediately became my favorite client, which I am not ashamed to say, even to all of my clients, as they understand why. And I started getting more and more involved in the project beyond just the technology scope of our work. And my wife and I were invited to take a seat on the board, and we have since been elected the board presidents. And from a client perspective, the challenge we were faced with was applying our framework, the methodology that I have shared with you today, to this community, the IDD community, and the opportunity to really prove that our process was independent of build type. Not only was this the first time we were building for the IDD community, it was actually our first multifamily development. So how do we leverage technology in a space geared specifically to this vulnerable population? And during the course of our research and our design meetings, we identified the two most critical areas as community and safety and security. I want to talk a little bit about safety and security to share some insights into how our method works. The first thing we noted is that our residents are not the only users we were designing for. Especially when it comes to resident safety, it is just as important to ensure the primary caregivers, we as the parents, feel safe and secure. For many of us, we're releasing our kids out into the world for the first time, sending them out on their own amidst the wolves it can seem. And this can be a very scary proposition, often more for us than for them. An additional step in the design process is considering not just the occupants' needs, but the appropriate security posture for the building as a whole. A suburban apartment complex versus a downtown office in Pioneer Square, Seattle. I have a story there specifically about physical safety. We need to consider the neighborhood, the surrounding businesses and potential threats. Is it liquor stores and nightclubs or dog parks and daycares? This information informs our decisions about security applications like access control and video monitoring. Because even in regards to physical security, there is such a thing as too much tech. We don't want it to be overbearing. Now, for Trailhead, within the units themselves, we considered solutions such as motion detection and video monitoring, some which are a building owner cannot legally deploy, which helped drive some of the decisions we made. We talked about utility monitoring to identify things like appliances running too long or water overflowing. Video doorbells and smart home automation systems made the list. Automated medication reminder boxes. And again, to go back to the parents, how do we empower them to remotely monitor their kids without being overbearing? This is an opportunity for our children to gain more independence, but it can't be at the expense of their safety. And there were other challenges that we had to overcome, especially when we're looking at the individual level. There are varying levels and degrees and needs of care for our residents, different degrees of technology literacy. So what we opted for is an opt-in strategy. We have built the infrastructure into each space to support whatever end products might be needed, but we leave it to the individual residents to really identify those needs. But whatever they need, whatever they want to deploy, the infrastructure is in place to support them. And from the property's perspective, considering that this building is not strictly for adults with IDD, it's about 60% that population. The remainder is affordable housing and active seniors. So this gives us unit flexibility. We're able to turn a unit from an IDD unit to a senior unit to a affordable housing unit without having to tear out or install any technology. It's just the infrastructure. It's already there in every unit. And just to close out this story, I'm happy to report that as of late last year, we are open. As of now, we have about 45 residents moved in, and we still have about 30 units left to sell. All of our rentals are rented out with a long waiting list, but we're still selling units. And so, just as a brief aside, if this is a mission you have a heart for, or you have somebody in your family or within your networks that might value from this type of housing, please reach out. You already have my email address. We're probably already connected, but if we're not, all that information will be at the end. Now, I want to move on to an exciting announcement. For the first time in this series, we're announcing our new service offering, AI in the built world. You all know the built environment is changing, and it's changing fast. AI is no longer a future concept. It's actively reshaping how buildings are designed, built, operated, and experienced today. AI in the built world is Layer 10's strategic framework. We have designed this to help commercial real estate leaders harness the power of AI through 5 pillars: design smarter, build faster and safer, operate intelligently, elevate the experience, and invest strategically. We call it intelligence as a service. This is our category defining approach to embedding intelligence, not just automation, into the built environment. We're designing buildings that think, adapt, and serve. From predictive systems to personalized environments, IaaS enables spaces to continuously deliver value without constant human input. Layer 10 sits at the intersection of AI strategy, human-centered design, and design-build execution. We bridge the gap between vision and implementation, helping our clients lead the next wave of innovation. It's not about more technology, it's about smarter spaces. We design environments where technology fades into the background and experience leads. AI is being embedded into everything. We're seeing it everywhere, and the built environment is not immune. Layer 10 is leading the way to how AI will be revolutionizing the built world, from design through portfolio management. AI is a game changer. In the coming weeks, you'll see more about this across all of our channels. And in this class next month, this is going to be the focus of our conversation then. All right. So if you're watching this and you find yourself thinking this all sounds great, Ken, but what would it look like on my project? If this describes you, we need to talk. I've opened up a handful of 30-minute strategy sessions on my calendar. These are one-on-one calls where we will take a deep dive and look at your actual project, identify where the risks or disconnects are, and map out how to apply the Layer 10 framework before you run into the chaos. This is not a scheduled sales pitch. It's a working session. If you were serious about leading smarter with less friction and more alignment, grab a spot. I can only schedule so many of these. So if this is a calling to you, do not wait. Reserve your session now. The link in the QR code are on the screen. I'm going to keep both of those up as I finish out the presentation here. So while you're doing that, while you're signing up for your session, I'll spend some time addressing some questions. Okay. First question, how do I future-proof my spaces? Well, my response to that is I would say you don't want to, at least not in the language that is in the question here. It's the wrong question. Future proofing suggests a defensive posture, that you're trying to hold the future at bay, that you're trying to push it back for as long as you can. That's not what we want to do. We want to embrace the future. We want to develop future ready spaces. So how do we do that? Not by trying to predict what the future may bring in regards to what technologies in 5, 10, 20 years are going to be changing, implemented into our spaces. We have to embrace what we do know, what we can make safe bets on, not what's going to be different, what's going to be the same. What's going to be the same is there's going to be a lot of technology, a lot of new things. We don't know what those are specifically, but there's going to be a lot of it. So how can we prepare for that safe bet? And the way we do so is an investment in the infrastructure. Especially when you're building new, which is the bulk of what we do, but not exclusively, but when you're building new and the walls are open, design for a future that you don't know what it looks like. Put in more pipe, more conduit, more pathway than you think you need now. Drill an extra core. It's pennies now compared to trying to do that in 10 years when that new technology comes out and you don't have a place to put it. So that's my advice on this question on future readying your spaces. I've rewritten the question. Okay. Next question. How do I get my clients to make the investment I guess the investment in technology is what we're talking about here. Well, I'll take you back to that story that I shared towards the beginning of the presentation. It's getting them to understand the why. To ask them, why are we here? Why did you take this meeting? Why are we talking about this? What is your experience with technology? How has it worked for you in the past? How have you designed that into your space as opposed to designing it onto your space when it's too late? And you get them having those conversations, and it's demonstrating that value. And it needs to be right. It doesn't have to be the latest and greatest. It just has to work. So it doesn't take the highest investment. It just takes the highest attention. That wasn't too bad. What about getting VE'd out, value engineered out? That is certainly a reality these days in the current economic climate, that budgets are getting crunched. Pro formas are getting blown up with interest rates and inflation. And technology is easy to cut out. So I go back to something I've mentioned a couple of times now today, investment in the infrastructure. If I can't afford to deploy all the systems, all the products that I wanted to, if I need to pull back on some of those, make sure I'm still building the pathway. I'm laying the cable for that so that when I can afford it in 6 months or 2 years, everything is ready to go. And it's as close to a plug and play solution as I can imagine. That would be my advice on that. Is you're not going to be able to fight it. You just lean into it, so to speak, and share with your clients where their investments should be made. Okay, do you do coaching and training? Yes. I mentioned the Layer 10 Academy at the beginning, but I haven't talked about it really too much in detail today. The Academy is our training platform. So we have our Layer 10 is our consulting arm where we go in and we do this work for our clients. Academy is how we train our clients, architects, developers, contractors, even some integrators, project managers, and any of these teams who want to get smarter about how technology is designed and deployed into their spaces. So yes, we do that virtually through the Academy, and we also do live coaching and training with groups. So if you have any questions on that, use the link, schedule a session, and we'll talk. Okay. So I think that's it on the questions. Let's move to our final slide. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate your time. Your investment in this material means the world to me. It's the thing that I'm passionate about is moving the needle, changing the way that spaces are designed and built in regards to technology and how technology can revolutionize the built environment. I invite you all to stay connected. You can find us where you find everyone across the socials, Facebook to YouTube. You can connect with me personally on LinkedIn as well as follow our company page there. And while you're there, while you're on LinkedIn, be sure to subscribe to our weekly Building Tomorrow newsletter. This is where you will be able to stay on top of not only what we're working on at Layer 10 and our new training opportunities, but also the latest trends in the space. And we're going to be going deep into this AI in the built world series that we launched last week. So this week is our second in that series. We're going to go deep into that as we continue to focus on how artificial intelligence is revolutionizing the built environment. And if you have any questions about Layer 10 consulting services, the Layer 10 Academy training, or Trailhead, if that mission speaks to you, don't hesitate to reach out. My email address is on the screen. We love engaging with our audience, and we're always looking for innovative individuals and companies who are looking to make a difference. So that's it. I hope that you have gotten value for the investment of your time here today, and that we gave you some actionable insights to take into the field. I wish you all the best. Stay blessed, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.